Okay, I'm going to call our village board meeting for June 21st, 2021 to order. Roll call, please.
Nat LaFront.
Here.
Bill Random. Bill Willems.
Here.
Chris Elner.
Here.
Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Aaron Moran.
Here.
Gary Hertzberg.
Here.
Okay, first item we have confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on June 17th. The final agenda was posted at all 3 village posting locations on June 17th. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on June 17th.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda. Would anybody like anything pulled, or I'd look for a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Aaron Moran,
I'll second it.
second by Nyla Fry. Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. By the way, that's unusual for me to have to say that like that, because we were taking roll call votes forever. So that was an exciting thing for me right there.
Chris, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
I can't see you, Todd. So, all right, thank you. Next, we have public comment. Is there anybody here who'd like to make a comment for tonight?
I do have one written comment.
Okay,
This is from Linda Ashford at 114 South Street. I support the proposed flag policy using existing policy that has already been vetted and approved by our state and national level to determine which flags are allowed makes sense. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. As I noted when I spoke in favor of flying the pride flag, that flag had already been approved and flown at the state and national level. Thank you to Todd and the village attorney for working on this. Linda Ashmore, 114 South Street.
perfect.
Oh, you go.
I was just gonna say congratulations to our state champion lacrosse team. We should give a shout out to them, so congratulations to that group. Well done, great season for them. And then Todd.
Does music count as a comment? It is going to today, if that's all right. So it is Make Music Day on the entire planet. And we are one of over 1,000 communities across the world that are celebrating on this day. So June 21st every year is Make Music Day, and this is the first time that Waunakee's ever participated. Very fitting that it's just celebrating during our 150th year as well, so that's kind of cool. In front of you is a list of all the venues that have been coordinated for people to enjoy music and perform music here in Waunakee. Huge shout out to the Create Waunakee committee that agreed to kick this off. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron's our chair of Create Waunakee, and that committee had a presentation from, I think, is it the head of the Make Music Day in the United States presented, and the committee was supportive, and off we went. Huge shout out to Kylie West for really pulling together all the details. And I know you're just going to be exhausted at the end of the day, but it's been a great day. Nice work, Kylie. So with that, we've got an array of materials that are available online. We've got a website, and we've been promoting the heck out of this thing. And today we want to share, totally appropriately right here with the board meeting, some talented younger musicians in our community. So we've got three prepared pieces for you to enjoy tonight. First is going to be Todd Niles. And Todd, if you just introduce your piece and take it away.
Great. All right. I'm going to be playing the creatively named Concerto No. 1 by Accolade. And my name is Todd Niles.
Nicely done, Todd. What grade are you in or going into?
I'm going into my senior year.
All right, congratulations. Pedro, you're next. Pedro Doria.
Hi, my name is Pedro, and I'm gonna play "Count on Me" from Bruno Mars.
And what grade are you in?
Fifth. If you ever find yourself lost in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the one to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, and I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, every day I will sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, and I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'll never let go, never say goodbye. You'll always have my shoulder when you cry. So you can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, and I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nice job, Pedro. Next, we have Gwen Severson. Welcome, Gwen. Pedro, I would note your sister doing the counting with her hands, 1, 2, 3, was pretty darn cute too.
All right, hello, I'm Gwyneth Severson. I just finished freshman year at Waunakee High School. I will be playing Chartist by Monty.
add that as a regular item on our agendas going forward.
So I would,
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
I would like to thank all of you for coming and sharing your talents with us tonight. That was amazing. The numbers were easy for us. Usually they're not so easy at the village board. So the 1, 2, 3 was great. I love that song. You played beautifully, both of you, and thank you so much for coming and sharing your talents. All right.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? And yes, this is by far the best public comments we've had.
And I told Kayla not to
13
cut him
years.
off at 2 minutes.
That was 13 years.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
You
Okay,
guys shouldn't feel bad if you get up and leave, because.
I would, I would.
Thank you.
he didn't mean you, Roberta. He didn't mean you. Okay. All right,
One other public comment?
yeah.
I wanted to introduce, we gave you guys an update last meeting at our village reorganization, and we mentioned that Gabe had joined us, and this is Gabe Alternburn. He is our management and communications intern, and he'll be with us for the next year.
Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you.
And are you staying?
I am.
All right. Awesome. Okay. All right, next we've got, our first item is a public hearing, discuss and take action on a request by MLG Commercial for a certified survey map to divide Lot 9, Waunakee Business Park Phase 2 into 2 separate lots. Who's introducing?
Yeah, I'll just quickly introduce it. You had if you recall, we had a presentation at our last board meeting, because they're kind of doubled up for MLG to come and attend. But the very quick summary is that in the business park, at the very end of Prairie View Court, there is a larger, about 20-acre site, and there is development interest in a portion of that site. So the division here allows them to develop that larger site into 2 unique industrial park lots. So that is the quick summary.
So I'm going to open up the public hearing and probably close it fairly quickly, unless Roberta has a question. Okay. All right, then I'm going to close our public hearing. Board members' comments or motions?
Planning Commission looked at this and liked it, so I'd make a motion that we approve the Lot 9 certified survey map, subject to Strand comments being addressed prior to recording.
Okay, we have a motion by Phil Willems,
Second.
second by Gary Hertzberg. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, in our new business, we have discussion and update regarding COVID-19 pandemic. Todd, any comments? or-
Besides, here we are, back in the old stomping ground. Still the following that we've been doing with Dane County Emergency Management and Dane County Public Health has shown extremely positive trends, so we're thankful for that. I guess I'd ask if Dr. Bill Random has anything
Pretty
to
much
add?
the same, everything seems to be going.
Yeah.
Still encouraging everybody to get their vaccines. Otherwise, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have discussion and update regarding American Rescue Plan Act fiscal recovery funds and conceptual usage / projects.
And Renee's going to start by providing some background information. Both she and I have been consuming gobs of information that's been coming like fire hose strength at municipal officials. So we're going to quickly summarize that for you, and there's a memo in your packet to follow.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few things from the memo in the packet. And we talked very briefly about this last time when we were talking about the hybrid meetings and that equipment. But just to summarize, in March, the Congress approved the American Rescue Plan Act. As part of that, the Village of Waunakee is estimated to get approximately $1,471,000. I filed the required report by last Friday with the state of Wisconsin. So we are expected to get our first half of our money by the end of the month, and then we will get the next half of the money a year from now. We have until December 31st of 2024 to spend that or obligate it, meaning enter into contracts. And then if you have a contract that's open, you can spend that money until December 31st of 2026. So the Congress wants this to be a longer term. The CARES money last year was quick, and we had to spend it in a relatively quick fashion. They're looking for longer term things. Their priorities are really to respond to the public health emergency, and to really address the negative economic impacts, both to businesses and individuals, caused by the pandemic. This time they are letting us make up some of our lost revenue that we had, not only for 2020, but you can do a calculation for every year in case there's lingering effects in 2021 particularly, and even beyond that. We could make up some of that lost revenue. They also are highlighting essential workers and giving them premium pay where needed. And then they're looking to for places to invest in broadband and water and sewer infrastructure as well. Those are kind of their 5 big areas. Guidance is still coming out on this all the time. Right now, we're just in the phase of an interim final rule, which means we can start acting on things, even though the final rule won't be issued till after July 16th, when the comments on the interim final rule are due. And then the Treasury has issued questions and answers. They've already updated that 3 times, and they're doing that about every 2 weeks with just the volume of questions that they're getting on how these can be spent, and trying to be helpful to municipalities so that they can meet the requirements of the grant, and that we don't want to have to pay this back at the end, because if you either don't spend it or spend it incorrectly, then we would have to refund the Treasury. So also in the packet, I did put a couple handouts in there. One was from the Department of Treasury, which is kind of a nice summary on what their goals were, and some ideas on uses of the funds. And then also the Wisconsin Department of Revenue came up with a handout, kind of a 1-pager that shows some of the eligible uses, just to help give places ideas. So I thought those are some good summaries for those looking for more information on that. And then I think Todd's going to now talk about some of our early thoughts on.
Yeah, before I jump into that, well, 2 things. One, all of you might not know, some of us do, and it's something I really appreciate about Renee, is that she comes from a successful and reputable career in public sector auditing. And certainly at a high level at the federal government, there will be a close eye on the way that these dollars are used. So I'm really thankful that we have someone with Renee's background here to help us through that. So before I talk about potential projects, are there any other questions about the law that you might have that we can try and answer? If not, then I want to present tonight some project and program proposals that staff are suggesting to you as possible approaches for use of the funds. And let me remind you what Renee said. We're not forced to start spending these dollars on day one. However, I would add, if there is an opportunity today to succeed as a village government supporting our citizens and our businesses who are impacted directly, and we can make a good impact today, I hope that the village board sees fit to do some of that as well. So these are just some ideas that we'd like you to talk about. If any of these resonate, what we'd be looking for from staff today is direction for us to pursue program design further, at which point we would contemplate the costs, the implementation, and then present those project proposals to you in more detail at a future meeting. So that's what we're looking for. Or programs that you might think of that we might not yet have considered, that you'd like us to research further, we'd be happy to do that for you too. So with that, here is 6 sort of program areas. One is to consider assistance to at-risk and underserved populations. So the village as an organization doesn't have a department per se that really works in this specific area, but we do have an organization in the village who does, in the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection. And the law does allow communities to essentially donate or allocate funds to another organization, in this case a nonprofit, to support an outcome that meets the goals of the law. WNC does have a fund called the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund that goes to support people in our community in need. The potential would be for the village to submit a sum to that fund that then WNC could utilize for support of families and individuals who can sort of document or identify COVID impacts. So essentially this would be sort of seeding that fund to do greater things than it can now. Should I just roll through, or do you want to stop point by point, Chris?
I think roll through, and if people have
Okay.
questions, just raise your hand and.
All right. One thing to do that, I would note that WNC's reach is beyond the boundaries of the village. I would suggest if this were a program that we would, I wouldn't say challenge, but urge our neighboring communities whom WNC also serves to consider a similar contribution using their ARPA funding. So maybe together we can make an impact there. This next one is a unique idea that actually, as I've shared it with some other city managers in the region, they find it to be unique, but perhaps very effective use of our funds. So both our households have been affected, all of your households have been affected, and our businesses have been affected. So I've wondered how can we impact both at the same time. In this proposal, an approach might be to utilize what you might know as the Chamber Bucks program, or maybe something similar, and essentially send a shop local stimulus check, a Chamber Buck check, to every household in the village for use at a local business. Not only do we infuse cash into our households, we directly send that straight back to the businesses in our community and nowhere else. So it's a unique way to approach this. Will it take administration and processing and some work, of course, but this is kind of like the double whammy approach that I'm suggesting. Another would be related to the presentation you saw at your last board meeting, enhancements to our AV systems so we can better facilitate now and in the future a hybrid approach to board and committee meetings. So that is there on the table. Also, affordable housing projects are called out as eligible under ARPA funds. Now, timing is interesting. We haven't yet paid the dollars for the Cohen Esri project that the village board has already approved. And if you recall, that was somewhere like $400-something thousand from our TID2 extension into our newly created Affordable Housing Fund. What I'm suggesting is that we either entirely or partially supplement what we would have paid out of the TID2 fund with the ARPA dollars for affordable housing, then reinstating the TID2 funding into the affordable fund, which doesn't have the same limitations as does ARPA during this confined time frame. So that would be a technique to essentially convert funds back for broader future uses. Next would be looking at our village equipment and facilities. There are several ideas here from departments in the village that would include indoor air purification in larger congregate settings like the senior center dining room area, balcony awnings at the senior center for outdoor dining, equipment. As you saw, we faced challenges with some of the equipment in the community room a few weeks ago at the library. We could see fit to enhancing that with some new technologies. And then whether it's for village center programming or library programming, the notion of larger tents or similar canopies that could be used throughout the year to support outdoor programs is something we could consider. By the way, I've already sort of run some of these by our in-house auditor here, so I'm not out on a limb. I maybe just a little, but
I mean, we will definitely, for everything, have to look into it and make sure that we feel comfortable that it meets the criteria, but
it was
I feel pretty good about these.
comfortable enough to type on paper. There's one interesting aspect of the law is that we can, as Renee mentioned, work to recover lost revenue. I'll tell you that based on the formula guidance that we've been given, essentially the entirety of the 1.4 million could fall into the category if we care to call it out that way. Now, with the funds that are identified as lost revenue, those go back into the village coffers for uses with fewer restrictions than using the funding under the other standard categories of the ARPA law. It opens up, and the law does specify an array of uses, but they're definitely further reaching. So with that in mind, there's some ideas here that we can pursue should you want to go after any of these, which might be our cybersecurity updates, and we've already sort of given you, we talked a bit about how intense some of those investments are going to be for our organization to be protected. Facility upgrades. We're talking about Village Hall to Old Library. It is reasonable to consider the use of this for that function or other village functions like adding cold storage at Public Works. Training for staff on areas of mental health seems like it would be a really good and related approach to addressing the impact of a pandemic on our population and our population's mental health, to help our staff better address that. We supplemented the room tax to fully fund our chamber, the $10,000 allocation. I don't remember, it was like $6,000 or $7,000, but we could consider refunding our room tax fund, which we use for things like the hanging flower baskets and other programs. The Village Center did have to dip into surplus for times when we face a rainy day. That was a reality for the past year and a half. So we can replenish that for some future rainy day. And we can also look at municipal equipment purchases, heavy machinery, et cetera, and supply funding to make those purchases. With that, that data is also in front of you on paper, and I think now we'd be happy to take questions and see what your reaction is to those ideas or what others you might have.
Nyla, any questions or comments?
Not as of now. I may have one later.
Okay, Bill?
Well, I guess I would wonder about the equipment. I'm not in that segment, but I think this hard purchases are probably smart to make at this time with something like this.
Phil?
Definitely, and look at the things that we're going to get a return on, because that's what this is designed to help, so.
Gary?
I like the idea of this recovered lost revenue. I mean, I know there are issues at Public Works, because I'm fairly familiar with that from, 20-year-old furnaces that need to be replaced, and they always get bumped down the list. And, there's things that we need to do. I think that every year, these department heads are looking at their budgets going, well, I can't do that this year, I'll push it to next year. And I think this would be a good way for a lot of our departments to catch up with their facilities. I like some of these ideas about, transitioning to the old library and doing our AV equipment and getting up to speed for the, public library. So that's where I would focus.
Aaron?
Well, I think these are all great. I guess library board, last week we talked about how useful a tent would be for the programming and, and to help people feel safe, as well as the equipment for the community hall, and how expensive that, is, and even for our last meeting kind of thing. And so I think, some tangible things that, are going to help us the next time we have, hopefully not a pandemic, but something like that. And if that can be shared, this is like a huge event tent too, so that might help our, our rentals and stuff like that, if that's another service. I really like the chamber bucks idea. I think I have like a few random logistical questions, but I think kind of where we can help people and our businesses. And the neighbor to neighbor fund, I think, would be really important, where that's gonna help really specific situations that,
I
Very
added on,
needed.
the food pantry, is that inside that then, or is that?
Well, I think the food pantry could exist as an organization to which we support a program financially. Their only objective would be to make sure that those they serve can document or be clear about the COVID impacts that they've faced. So yeah, yes, Bill, that would be,
is this,
unless
oh,
you agree.
No, I think so, right. Just the main thing, even with the neighbor to neighbor, right, people would have to document that they, say, lost their job as a result of COVID, to make them eligible for some of these things. It's pretty specific in the guidance that it has to be because of COVID, not just a general need.
if we go that route and maybe our neighboring communities don't match us or also contribute, do we have the ability to then say, like, the money can only be used for residents, like, in their application for that?
You'd have to.
Right?
Village residents specifically. I would think that, I would guess that WNC would be able to implement a program specifically
Okay.
that way if we were to ask.
And have we talked to them, is this where they, if they receive funding, where it would be best put to use?
Only as a very preliminary idea did I mention to Lisa, I would say that she believes that the need is very real
Okay.
for the people that they serve. So she was excited about the potential, but certainly I didn't give her any assurances on how we'd approach it.
Sounds good.
Sam?
I definitely think that it would be good to prioritize these funds for facilities and equipment purchases, some of our big ticket items that we've been putting off. But I think this is a good, thorough, broad list, and we have a lot of options that we could go with, and I like all these.
Make a
Go ahead,
comment.
Nyla.
I go along with what Sam says as far as prioritizing things, and some things are more of a need, and some things are a want. And if we can prioritize, it will help us determine where we're going. We all can see in our different committees, things that the wish list and the things that need to be done. Our buildings that need furnaces, that is something that is probably a pretty good need. So I'm just thinking, divided into needs and wants. That's one of the first things I learned in school, is that needs and wants, so that's what I think.
Okay, so I pretty much feel the same way as all of you. I mean, we have money that we didn't expect necessarily, that we can use for things that we need fixed and or replaced or upgraded. I mean, that's really what I see this as a positive for. To Nyla's point, prioritizing, this is no different than a budget, in my opinion. It's hard for me looking at this sheet to say, all right, we have $1.4 million. How much do each of these things cost? Because that's also gonna be a determining factor on where we're gonna look at those things and which ones we're gonna prioritize. So we know that, Village Hall, maybe that's gonna be $800,000. Well, that's a pretty big dent out of that amount. We know that to reimburse for the chamber is $6,000. That's not gonna be as much of a dent. So I think that would help us if we put some dollars to these as well as we go.
The departments head start working on their budgets probably in July, I suppose.
I'm starting them this week to start on it, but they won't get them back to me till July.
So I think that's a good way for us to work this all together, is with that budget as we're going. There's some things, we talked about the AV equipment last meeting, and we kind of pushed it because if we're gonna go with the new library, we're gonna use funds for that, those kind of will come together, those AV systems as well as the new library. So, when I say new library, I mean our new village hall. I said that wrong. our new village hall at the old library with the AV upgrades. So, yeah, I think this is a great list to work off of. Thank you for putting this together, and I just think that, you know, we as a group will have to come together and decide what the priorities are in here and work with staff to get that done. We're not gonna know all that necessarily, so it's gonna be important that staff give us those recommendations too. Yeah,
I think that's important maybe for staff to know. I mean, they're trying to go through the normal budget process. Not that they have additional monies to spend, but at least that they know in the budget to make sure they list the things that they need to get done versus saying, well, gosh, I know I'm not gonna get that money, so I'm not even gonna bring that up. I wanna make sure that they know there's some additional funds here that, that they maybe have access to, so they can put it in their budget, so we can see what their needs are.
I guarantee you, your department heads have those lists. You just you don't see the entirety of them when we come budget time.
Though we did bring it up at a department head meeting, and a number of these ideas came directly from them as what they felt were, you know, like the tents and the, some of the other air purifiers and things that they brought up.
The law really does clearly reference utilities, sewer and water. We did we had an initial conversation with Tim, and he didn't put anything on the table out of the gate. Do you recall?
He did not. I mean, there are, even though, you know, this sounds more general, there are some parameters, and I'm not familiar enough with, they have to be eligible for Clean Water Fund and Safe Drinking Water, the same eligibility that those grants would be for, and I'm not familiar with those.
Like
but
replacing
yeah, so
laterals
yeah,
Yeah.
so he did not, but, you know, we certainly can circle back with him. But yeah, in this particular ARPA, you know, they excluded street infrastructure, because, you know, they're talking about another whole program for that. So the focus is on water, sewer, and broadband at this point, but,
So, to help staff, you know, policy prioritization, that you have the privilege of sitting in the 7 seats that will help us with that. Is there anything that you care for us to remove from the list? I mean, this is gonna really help us staff get down to what you do want to see. For example, the notion of the swap of funding for affordable housing from TID 2 extension. Does that resonate with any of you, or do you want that crossed off the list for consideration?
I'd like it to stay on the list.
I think
I'd
we
like to take
could-
it off the list, but.
I'd like to also keep it on the list.
so why would we like to keep it on and why would we like to take it off? Because we had,
Can I answer?
yeah, go
The
ahead.
reason I'd like to keep it on the list is because the people who would use that type of housing were among the hardest hit during COVID-19. And also, when you look at what the Housing Task Force proposed as far as numbers of units they wanted us to get done, we're not going to come close to meeting those goals. And I just feel this would be perhaps an opportunity to be able to move a little further ahead in that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think just mostly following along with what Nyla said, helping get our housing task force recommendations completed more quickly. I think this would be a way that we could hopefully do that.
Gary?
Yeah, my thought is that, you know, most communities are just starting in this realm, and and their budgets were probably $20,000 or $30,000 they've invested in TID money to help affordable housing. You know, we took $400,000 basically out of the tax base to say, okay, we're gonna dedicate $400,000 to help affordable housing. So I think we've made an awful big investment already. And there's other things this community needs, that I think we can use this money better for.
Okay,
Chris?
yeah.
I'd like to respond to that. The reason we have those funds available is because the village has supported TIF funding to the extent it has, which has helped the developers and the business people in Waunakee. That's why we have those funds available. Many communities do not have those funds available, and that's why they don't have them to use. And Waunakee has always prided itself of doing the best they can for the entire community. And this is one way to continue that, is to show that we're doing what we can to develop the village in a way that brings funds so that they can be used for affordable housing. And that helps the entire community with having jobs for people, which helps the economy, which helps the businesses. So that's just what I think about it.
Okay, so I mean, I don't want us to go sidetracked into a whole TIF belief policy situation here between our board members. I don't think that's probably the appropriate thing tonight, but with regards to the Cohen-Esri, so we've heard about that, so I don't know if that gives you enough direction, but I'd say that's one that's a debatable one at this point, is where I'd put that one. Everything on here, again, I go back to everything on here, Todd, is warranted to be on here. You said the staff helped you to put this together, so to me, I think we just need to see some more details about those things and where the dollars fall, and how we're gonna go about using those.
The one thing you don't see on here, which is the greatest of guidance that we've received from the federal government, is to attempt not to create new programs that will require funding beyond the time frame of the funding horizon. So you didn't see anything about creating a new position or creating a new department or creating a new program under village effort. So I think staff would say all these are reasonable approaches, and we can do some work to provide some quantities for you, but when it comes down to it, we're gonna be, again, looking back to you to tell us what to do first. Again, time is on our side. We do have several years to work on this, so, but we are interested in trying to make a dent in the impact.
Chris? If you got a
Go Phil first.
Okay. I think both for the TID thing, we're going to have more TIFs closing out, and we're gonna have an opportunity to replenish this fund as we go forward, although it's possible we could use some of it to replenish what we did with Cohen-Esri. I think we should encourage our department heads to look at things that they could do that they had to put off, that if they made this investment long-term, it would benefit us going forward. For example, we're inheriting, I don't know how many retention ponds a year, and our guys are having trouble with this stuff. The neighborhood wants it to look like this, but yet they wanna put their lawn chemicals in there, and we don't really have all the equipment we need to keep these things clean, nor the expertise. And maybe going forward, if,
Revenue.
that's just one thing, if we could help on that, we would accomplish the clean water, the clean living, et cetera, that we want. Now, that may be a silly idea, but it's just an example.
Aaron?
I guess for me, the priority would be like the reason we're receiving this money is like we had a pandemic, and obviously everyone's life changed, but like there are some people that, lost a family member and now have half the income or, rent, those things. So like I would hope we prioritize actual ways we can like truly impact someone, and like this is where the money's coming from. I agree, like things that we had to put off last year with the 0% budget, but in what ways are we not seeing what's, I guess, the drastic impact that's going to continue, and if we can help speed up,
I think
some stability for people, is fine.
The good news, Aaron, as I look at it, is the sum we've been granted,
Is
1.4 million, I would assume can help us accomplish both that and some, call it infrastructure needs or yeah. So I think there maybe is room to do some of both.
Okay. Yeah.
Can any of our districts be money used for those? Fire?
I believe we can contribute to.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to follow the same guidance. We would have to monitor them, just like we'll have to monitor any nonprofits that we give money to make sure that they are adhering to the guidance, because it's our money. And we have to make sure that it's spent, no matter who we give it to, but yeah.
I think that,
They did
That
get,
was That
I
was where
mean-
my question was going, was are they getting additional funding from other, I don't know that, that's why I'm asking.
they are not. We did share quite a bit of our routes to recovery, the CARES money, with the fire and utility at that time. Right, so we haven't done anything to broach anything with them, but I have heard of other places that, might use it for their districts like that.
and it may, I guess I would add, similar to the thought of funding WNC with the broader population, if that were an approach we take, I think one trick to that would be seeing that there is participation from the other communities that are a component of those districts. And, who are we to spend their money? So that can be a little tricky as we approach it, but not an impossibility. And I'd be happy to talk to both districts if you'd like to see what might be on their list.
This might have been answered, but is there anything with the school that we would be responsible for, or like?
I do think that the school districts are getting their own.
Their own, okay.
Type of funding. So
To know.
I think that would be independent of this.
Okay. Anything else tonight, Todd, that we need to give you?
No, good discussion. The feedback is excellent, and we'll keep working on it.
Okay. Next, we have discuss and take action on proposed display of flags and street lighting policy. Brian, you taking this one?
Sure. So there was a draft policy in your packet, but then Todd has also shared with you, I think, in front of you, a revision to it with some additions to correct some errors or essentially some practices that we already have. So when we put this together, I think as Todd had noted in the memo, we did look, there's not a lot of policies like this that are out there across the country, but we did find a few that we utilized because they made sense and then essentially made it Waunakee's. Kind of some overriding principles as you look at this. We wanted to try to maintain as much past practice as possible. That's the reason why we have the exhibit that identifies all of the places where we currently display flags. We wanted to differentiate between the flags and the street lighting, and at the same time, maintain the practice for street lighting as much as possible. One of the things to take into consideration as we have the pride flag flying and as we adopt, this policy, whether it's tonight or some other night, is, this is governmental property. The decision to allow a flag other than the ones that we already have can get into some constitutional issues. And so that's one of the reasons why, if you look at section 2D of the policy, at least as proposed, we've tried to identify an objective basis for why we may decide to fly a flag. And we've essentially limited it to flags that would have been approved for display at the United States Capitol or our state capitol. That helps us narrow the types of flags that may be flown. I mean, there's definitely the possibility that as we go down this path, that someone may approach us about displaying a flag that the village doesn't want to display. And now you have potentially an issue because you're making a decision. I think to the extent that we may be able to say, you know what, that's not going to qualify because it's not a flag that's flown at the state capitol or at the U.S. Capitol, we're not making our decision based on the content of the flag. We're making a decision based on what the state and federal government have chosen. So that at least gives us one way to differentiate this. And then, I guess one other way that we've looked at this is if you look at section 4B, I guess on page 3 of the packet that's in front of you, when you get down to subsection B, we talked about only allowing these additional flags to be flown at Village Hall, the Village Library, or the Village Center. I mean, if you look at Exhibit A, we have a lot of places where we display flags in this village. And if you start putting on flags to every single pole, you're gonna create, I guess, at least from our perspective, quite an administrative burden and staff burden for that. But that's kind of the overview. Essentially what this allows is potential for, at those 3 locations, for a commemorative flag to be flown as long as it qualifies within the policy. And I guess available for any questions that you might have.
Well, I'm gonna start on this one. I usually go last, but I'll start and just say that I'm happy that we have a policy in front of us very quickly after it was requested. I think this accomplishes what my goals were, meaning we have a policy that any board can very quickly go to with anything proposed to us. Does it give us much flexibility, Brian, was my question. If it's not flown over the state or US, do we still have flexibility to say yes to something, or is it pretty much we're just gonna do that?
The way it's drafted now, it would have to be flown at one of those 2 places for you to allow it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was
Yep.
clear, for all of our board members to understand. Go ahead, Aaron.
That kind of goes on my first question. This just kind of, I guess, they just have to have some point been flown. It doesn't
Well,
have
I mean, I think
to actively at the same time, right?
correct. I mean, and we could put there can be more limitations. I mean, you might want to say, hey, just because some flag was flown in the 1800s, doesn't mean that we could put some type of limitation on that. And so at a certain level, it's kind of broad, because quite honestly, if you just do a little bit of research, you will see that there have been any number of flags that have been flown at the state and US Capitol. The other thing that you would run across is, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And my second question, I don't know if we need this, but where the flag comes from, if it's our responsibility to purchase it.
Well, actually, that's probably something that needs to be added, is, something related to whether, or, I mean, I think there's operational issues of, on the street lights, for example, wanting to make sure, I don't know how it's been done in the past. I think the goal is for the street lighting to do how we've done it in the past, which I think might be, the village has not incurred those costs. And it may be the same thing for the flags, which is, we're willing to do this as long as there's no cost to the
Besides,
taxpayer.
like, our time and.
Yeah, and so I think that's an area where maybe the policy needs a little bit beefing up. But I mean, it would certainly be reasonable if the board said, you know what, we're open to these ideas, but we also want to either limit or make sure that there are no costs to the taxpayers.
So hold on one second, Isla. So back to Aaron's comment about if they've ever been flown.
Mhm.
So are you saying we should put a limitation maybe on
I
a
th-
year, like a date stamp of some point?
I think I think it would be reasonable to do that. I mean, we'd probably want to try to identify some subjective time period. I mean, you don't want to just, we could look back.
Any time within the past 3 years or some.
Yeah, I
something.
mean, we might be able to find something, that, looking at the federal government and the state government as to how these made these determinations. Maybe they changed their policy in 1990 and said, okay, this is how we're going to approach this moving forward, and so we would kind of use that as the objective standard for identifying that date. We would have to do a little bit more research to find that, but I think it would be reasonable to add to this policy by trying to identify a time frame.
Nyla?
Okay, I guess I want to ask why the board members would have to make the request. Am I reading that right, under B, commemorative flags, under 1A?
I think in some effort to, I mean, if a resident wants a flag to be flown, all they have to do is come to a board member then and ask the board member to make that introduction. It's some way of a limitation to not have staff get bombarded with email requests, for example, to have certain flags flown. The board member gets to act as essentially as a conduit to make a determination as to whether or not they even want to come forward with that request. So it's more administrative in nature.
And it gets to the issue that I know the board mentioned before, which was the thought of this, something that causes a proliferation of requests. Now, I will tell you that in talking to a couple of cities who've flown a flag for commemorative reasons, while you might speculate that it could open up the floodgates, so to speak, none of the communities have said that they had a mad rush for flag raisings. But this does maybe account for that just a little bit by requiring a step so as to avoid the proliferation.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, anything?
Bill?
I like it.
Oh, I'm sorry, is it like, are you talking like a floating flag? I mean, like in the past 5 years, like from the date behind, or are you picking a date from 5 years ago and saying we're sticking with that date?
I guess it would be like a moving
Floating
date.
date.
Yeah,
Floating
yes.
I like the floating date idea.
Oh, so in other words, if it's been flown at either the state or the federal capital sometime within the last 5 years, for example.
Right, so that would
Okay.
stop that, personally, I mean, that stops that thing where you go, why did we let that happen?
Yep.
I guess my last question, I don't know if I'm just missing it, but any sort of, do we need a policy of like priority if two groups come to us and we've already approved one and then, or something like that, like the time frame? I guess if that makes sense.
Well, there is language in here trying to talk about when would it be displayed, and so this is I'm going to what Todd had handed out, and if you go to the third page, up towards the top, it says sub D, the dates for a display of a commemorative flag shall be reasonably related to the event or cause to be
I guess,
commiserated.
like if a group, or if one of us says, you know, this flag for the month, but then later it's like, well, we wanted this flag for the day within the month, and we'd send one at a time. Is
Yeah,
it just,
I'm not.
I don't know.
I think the best we could do on that is maybe add a paragraph that it says essentially we will address that on a case by case
Okay,
basis.
and
or
I don't know,
something.
if I just,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a valid point. I definitely think there's the possibility that that's gonna come up. I think it's just difficult to kind of
have us, yeah.
give the board the amount of discretion that it's gonna wanna have as it makes that determination and build that into the policy, other than just say, we'll do it on a case by case basis.
Caitlin mentioned a good example. Juneteenth falls during
Yeah,
Pride
that was my
Month.
kind of,
And the state lowers the pride flag over the Capitol during Pride Month, so they just have one flag flying on that day. So we could just do that.
And that seems like a reasonable approach.
We also have 3 locations that we could put one in one and one in the other.
Yeah, that's another thing, another determination that could be made.
okay,
So,
cool.
I mean, this wasn't necessary, I mean, this was meant to be, I think, kind of the beginning
Right.
of the analysis, hopefully capture a lot of it, but I think every question you guys are all raising right now are very reasonable questions to raise.
I like it.
so then tonight, are we just giving ideas back to you? Really what we want to
This
see
is
into
productive,
it?
what you've done already.
So you'll bring back next meeting? Yes?
Yeah, I kind of have on my notes, the 3 items that you all have kind of highlighted are this idea of a floating date, something to not just specify that it's got to be at the state or federal capital, but also some type of time frame. Possibly something, to address multiple flags. And then also whether or not we should add some language in here regarding, making sure that the village isn't covering any of the costs associated with, and did you have another one? Oh, yeah, cost purchasing. Those were and whether that's purchasing and/or essentially, I mean, I understand that there's certain things where we may want our personnel doing it, just from a safety standpoint, but, figure out a way to work that in where maybe the only cost that we're really incurring is very minimal staff time, essentially.
Okay, any other comments? So I just want to say I appreciate all of you, when we had the pride flag in front of us, that we pushed that through at the end of May to get it done for June. But we also put that limitation that we wanted to have a policy in place, and I think this is good public policy to make sure we are doing what we're doing. So I appreciate all of you with that.
And
Okay.
about 12 other cities tell us they're eager to see our policy because they need one too.
All right. Next, we have discussion update on Village Information Technology Managed Services request for proposal and IT policy creation.
Okay, so, we updated you guys probably over a year ago. We approved a contract to work with outside consultants on getting some more formal IT policies done for the village. We continue to work with that Kevin McDaniels from IT
Strategy
Services. We are going to be giving the department heads the draft policies this week. There are probably about 20 policies for them to review. They will be giving us feedback, and we can expect probably during the month of August for those policies to come to the village board for formal adoption. In the meantime, we are prepared to, July 2nd, publish a request for proposal for managed services for our IT. This is also what we've been talking about, but that proposal is drafted and will be published on July 2nd. During the month of July, beginning of July, we'll email it out to firms to see if they're interested in responding. With those to be due in early August for us, so we can get some numbers for our budget, and then that will formally come, if we have a successful RFP process, a contract will hopefully formally come to this village board for approval to get a managed service contract for IT services here at Village Hall. So just, I know it hasn't been on your agenda for a while, so we just wanted to update all of you guys, but you know that lots of work's going on behind the scenes, but we are continuing to move forward on those policies.
Does this all include cybersecurity or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Encompasses everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if there's any questions about that process, myself, Todd, and Renee have been involved in it, so we're happy to answer any questions.
Will that give us a more clear number for any of the recovery program money? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, because we are planning to request, so if we do implement a new company, what could they identify as one-time costs?
Okay.
And what would be ongoing, so that we can separate that, because the ARPA money, we only want to spend for one-time or very limited costs. We don't want that to be part of the annual cost, so we're gonna break that out.
That's all I have.
Any other questions for Caitlin?
Thank you.
Easy on you tonight. Okay. Sounds good. And then we have one more
Adjourn. Move to adjourn.
motion by Bill Rahana. Please, Sam.
Yes.
Second by Sam. Any other comments? I will just have one other comment, just to say that I hope to see you all at Waunakee. It is coming fast and furious, and Renee's been helping and doing a great job with me to get everything squared away for that event. So I appreciate all of you tonight, and I am gonna call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everybody.